Hi, this is Les and Amy from the RevGenetics Podcast. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube and now on Spotify, where we do a deep dive on supplements and longevity studies.
And today we are really diving deep into, one of the most talked about longevity compounds, spermidine, or SPD.
But with a really specific angle this time.
Exactly. We're sort of moving beyond the general anti-aging talk to look at its potential in some of the most critical, life-threatening conditions out there.
That's right. We're focusing on acute lung injury, or ALI, and its more severe form, which is Acute Respiratory Distress Syndrome, ARDS.
And these are, truly devastating conditions.
Absolutely. We're talking about this catastrophic runaway inflammation in the lungs. They have the tragically high mortality rates for patients who are already fighting a severe illness or, some kind of major trauma.
And what makes this dive so compelling, I think, is that the material we're looking at gives us a really clear mechanism.
It's not just a guess.
No, not at all. It connects spermidine's known benefits, that antioxidant, anti-aging power. It connects it directly to preventing severe organ damage right down at the cellular level.
Okay, so the paper we're really digging into is titled Spermidine Mitigates Lipopolysaccharide-Induced Acute Lung Injury by Enhancing Autophagic Flux.
Yeah, that's a mouthful. It sounds super technical, I know.
It really does.
But trust us, if you stick with us, the ideas behind it are surprisingly simple and honestly crucial to understand.
Okay, so that's our mission then. We want to really unpack how spermidine can act like a shield for your lung cells when they're under this catastrophic inflammatory attack.
And we're going to do it with simple language. Analogies, no jargon.
Let's do it. So let's start with the problem. Acute lung injury.
Okay. So imagine the most delicate parts of your lungs. The tiny, tiny lining of the blood vessels where all the oxygen exchange happens.
Right, the really important part.
The most important part. In ALI, that lining gets severely damaged. It gets destroyed. And that causes the lungs to fill with fluid. They swell up.
And that makes it incredibly hard to breathe, right?
Almost impossible to get enough oxygen. It's often triggered by something like a severe infection, which puts the whole system under just extreme stress.
Okay, and under that much stress, cells start to die. But the paper points out this isn't a quiet, orderly death. It's something else entirely.
Yeah.
Something called pyroptosis.
Yes. And this is where it gets really, really interesting.
Sounds intense.
It is. Pyroptosis is the best way to think about it is like a cell having a violent, uncontrolled internal explosion.
It's a explosion.
Literally, it's a disaster on a cellular level. The cell swells up, it ruptures, and it just spews all its internal contents, all its trash and inflammatory signals out into the tissue around it.
So it's not just dying, it's actively making things worse on its way out.
It's pouring gasoline on the fire. It sends out this massive alarm signal that fuels even more inflammation, which causes more cells to explode. It's a vicious cycle.
A runaway fire. It's a perfect way to put it.
Ooh,
but our cells must have some kind of defense, right?
They do. And it's a brilliant system called autophagy.
Autophagy. We talk about this a lot.
We do, and for a good reason. Think of autophagy as the cell's internal recycling crew, or its maintenance team.
Okay, so they're the cleanup crew.
They're the cleanup crew. And their job is to constantly clean up damaged parts inside the cell. And research has shown that when this crew is working properly, it can actually suppress that fiery explosion of pyroptosis.
So it can stop the fire before it spreads?
It contains it. But, the question then becomes, why does it fail during something like ALI?
Right. If the defense system is there, why is the inflammation winning? And I guess this is where spermidine finally enters the story.
This is exactly where it comes in. We already know spermidine is a powerful, we call it an autophagy inducer. It basically puts that cellular recycling crew into overdrive.
It hits the gas on the cleanup process.
Exactly. So the theory in the study was really simple, but, brilliant.
What if the cleaning crew is just stalled?
Yes. What if the inflammatory attack is so intense that it overwhelms and jams the machinery? And if it's jammed, could spermidine come in, unjam the system, and stop the explosions?
That makes so much sense. The inflammation isn't just killing the cells.
It's disabling the very system they need to survive the attack.
So the researchers set up an experiment to test this. They used mice.
Right, a standard model.
Yeah.
They induced a really severe inflammatory response to mimic ALI. But here's the key. They pre-treated some of the mice with spermidine first.
And the results?
They were dramatic. Really, really clear. At the best dose they tested, the SPD pretreatment massively reduced the physical signs of the lung injury.
And when you say physical signs, what are we talking about? How do you measure that?
Well, an injured lung fills with fluid, so it gets heavier. They measure the wet to dry weight ratio.
I see.
And a lower number means less fluid, less swelling, better function. The SPD group had way less swelling, much less fluid leakage, but more importantly, the chemical signals of those cell explosions.
The pyroptosis markers.
Exactly. They were dramatically decreased. So spermidine was physically lessening the damage to the lung itself.
Wow. Okay, so that's the proof in a living animal. But they took it a step further, right? Down to the cells in a dish. The in vitro stuff.
Yes, and this is where you get the mechanistic proof. The how. They took those specific lung-lining cells, put them in a dish, and hit them with the same inflammatory trigger.
What happened to the cleanup crew?
Just as they thought. It stalled. You could see the whole autophagy process just jam up. But when they added spermidine,
It got things moving again.
it completely restored the cleaning process. And only when that process was working again did the cell explosion stop.
Okay, that's incredibly specific. But they needed one last piece of the puzzle, right? To
Yeah.
prove that the cleanup crew was the only reason it was working.
The final crucial test. They used a chemical blocker, a compound called chloroquine, or CQ.
And what does chloroquine do?
It's known to forcibly shut down autophagy. It basically ties the hands of the recycling crew. No matter what, they can't work.
I see where this is going.
So they gave the cells spermidine, which should have protected them, but at the same time, they added the chloroquine to block the cleanup crew.
And the protection vanished.
Completely disappeared. That was the smoking gun. It proved definitively that spermidine protects these lung cells by fixing the internal cleanup system, which then stops the explosions.
So for you, the listener, the takeaway here is that this isn't some vague antioxidant effect. It's a direct mechanical fix. It's like calling in a master plumber to unjam the system right before the pipes burst.
A really fundamental mechanism for cellular survival.
RevGenetics sponsors these deep dives.
And a discovery like this, it just underscores the importance of understanding these cellular mechanisms. When you're thinking about supplements for your long-term health, you really want to focus on things that fix fundamental processes like this.
It's not about masking symptoms.
No, it's about providing true biological support at the deepest level, fixing the machinery before it breaks.
So to just quickly synthesize everything, this research gives us a really clear picture. Spermidine helps with acute lung injury because it stops that destructive explosion process.
Yeah.
Pyroptosis.
And crucially, that protection absolutely depends on its ability to get the cell's internal cleaning and recycling system, the autophagic flux, working again.
So this gives you, the listener, really specific knowledge. This isn't just about general anti-aging. This is about regulating a fundamental process that could determine whether an organ survives a life-threatening crisis.
It's about building cellular resilience, optimizing your internal machinery to withstand a major shock.
The data from the study is, it's incredibly compelling, but this is still early, right? This is the research that opens the door.
Exactly. This is the first step. They showed that it works, and they showed why it works. But the next question is mapping the exact signal.
How does spermidine tell the cell to start the cleanup?
Precisely. For this to move from a supplement study into, say, potential clinical management for ARD, you need that precise map. The researchers themselves said they still need to figure out the exact signaling pathway.
And are there any specific pathways they suspect?
Oh, yes. They are really interested in the AMPK-MTR pathway.
We've talked about that one before.
Yeah.
It's like the cell's master switch, right?
It's the master energy sensor. It's the traffic cop that tells the cell either, hey, things are great, let's grow. That's MTR, or, whoa, times are tough, shut down growth and start recycling and repair. That's AMPK activating autophagy.
So they need to map exactly how spermidine flips that switch from grow to clean up.
If they can validate that map, it strengthens the case for clinical use, exponentially. And they also need to look at what happens after the fire is out.
The downstream effects.
Right. They need to check its effect on specific inflammatory molecules that get released, like interleukin-1, to make sure the debris is actually getting cleared out effectively.
So the path forward is pretty clear then. The next big step has to be clinical trials in humans.
That's the essential next step, to see if this incredible protective effect they saw in the lab and in mice holds true for people in a critical care setting.
It's just a fantastic example of a well-known longevity compound showing this incredibly targeted, powerful ability to provide resilience right when the body needs it most.
We hope you enjoyed tuning in to today's podcast on the latest published science and got a few useful takeaways.
Thank you for listening to the RevGenetics Podcast.
RevGenetics.com for the best longevity supplements on Earth.